Shabbat Shalom. As we prepare to light our Shabbat candles, I want to acknowledge with gratitude the presence this evening of WRT's pianist and conductor, Pete Malinverni, who opened our service. We'll be hearing a little bit more from Pete later on in our service as we acknowledge this Shabbat that precedes Martin Luther King Day. And at this time, we will kindle the lights of Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Again, Shabbat Shalom and welcome. We're so glad that we've gathered together this evening, even in a digital space, to welcome Shabbat. I'm Rabbi Daniel Reeser. I was joined a moment ago in the leadership of this evening service by Cantor Amanda Kleinman, and as Cantor mentioned, by Pete Malinverni at the piano. This weekend, America marks the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, a holiday that reminds us of the civil rights era and the tremendous advances that we made as a society in the 1950s and 60s, and also hopefully a day that reminds us of the work that is still needs to be done in order to make this country the best that it possibly can be. Many of you may be tuning in this evening in hopes that you'll get to hear from our good friend, Pastor Stephen Pogue, the senior pastor of Greater Centennial AME Zion Church in Mount Vernon. Pastor Pogue will indeed be joining our congregation as he always does this year, and he'll be doing so in June, actually on June 18th, that's a Friday night, in celebration of Juneteenth, the commemoration of the day that the last enslaved African Americans were set free in this country in the 19th century. So we hope that you'll join us again on June 18th to hear a message from our friends at Greater Centennial and specifically from Pastor Pogue. This week, not only because of Martin Luther King Day, but also because of the times we're living in, we feel the historic nature of our era. Regardless of how one feels politically, regardless of anyone's ideology, there's one thing that Americans share in common in these times of deep division, and that one thing is a deep anxiety about the future of the country that we all love so dearly. There are lots of things we can do to help make our country the best that it can be. We can work alongside people who are doing the best to make this country what it ought to be. And when the work is done, and even before the work begins, to inspire us, to remind us what it is that we need to do, we can lift our voices in prayer and hope that the anxieties that divide us from one another might soon subside and that we might make sense of these turbulent times yet. And so to open our Shabbat evening worship, we wanted to offer the prayer for our country. This version of that prayer is written by Rabbi Ron Weiss. God, who watches over all creation, give wisdom to those who are leaders among us. Inspire with creativity those who legislate. Provide compassion to those who make decisions affecting our lives. Educate them in the ways of justice that are the vision of the Hebrew prophets. May they never be far from mercy and understanding, fairness and equity. We ask for cooperation between people of different races and religions. May we have the courage to speak out against bigotry of all kinds. May the young profit from the experience of their elders and also share with them the idealism of their youth. May we all work towards a common goal, the improvement of humanity. God, who created our beautiful and beloved country, preserve its beauty. Protect your creations from selfishness, abuse, and destruction. Provide wisdom to all who dwell here and teach us to be strong. Give us the ability to work with other nations for a better world and maintain our good lives in harmony and in love. With wise leadership that fosters cooperation rather than war. Protect us with Sukkot Shlomecha, your shield of peace. And let us say, Amen.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriot dream that sees beyond the years. Thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. We continue welcoming Shabbat now with the words of Lecha Dodi. We'll sing together verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. Before we sing the final verse, we invite you to rise to face the door of the room you're standing in to help welcome the Shabbat bride. Lecha Dodi. ושלום עטרת עליו, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עמסי כולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרבה, לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקרבה. We remain standing now for the Baruch Hu, our call to prayer. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam Va'ed.
I have a wristwatch that I'm used to wearing every day. And sometime in the month of March, after the whole world shut down, the battery in my watch died. And it took me until just last weekend to finally make it to the watch repair store near our house and get the battery replaced, and finally be able to tell what time it is without having to dig into my pocket and look for my phone. And having my watch repaired, having it be able to tell me the time reliably without getting sucked down the rabbit hole of technology that is my phone, really brought me back to life in a way that when the watch had died, I didn't feel. And in some ways, that's how this whole pandemic has treated us. In some ways, it feels as if time stopped back there in March, and we've all sort of gotten sucked into this wormhole of technology. Now, in many ways, the technology has been additive. It's allowed us to congregate and gather like this together on a Friday night. And still, who among us hasn't experienced Zoom fatigue? Who among us hasn't wished that they could simply put their arm around the person that they love, the arm, by the way, that wears the wristwatch, rather than have to stare at them through the phone? It all reminds me that the Jewish people is a people who is attuned to the changes in time. As we say in our evening prayers, Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim, blessed are you, our eternal God, who helps our lives to be varied by attuning us to morning and evening, to spring, summer, and fall, to the changes that make life beautiful. Amen.
Amen. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. We continue now with Mi Chamocha, our peoples, song of freedom. That song we'll hear in our Torah portion in just a few weeks as we read about our ancestors becoming free people.
ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה הכל אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ובדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ולמען אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
We take a few moments for our own silent prayer and reflection.
Shabbat Shalom. And again, a reminder that our friend Pastor Stephen Pogue will be with us on Friday, June 18th. We hope you'll tune in that evening to hear his message. This weekend, our country remembers and celebrates the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a truly singular figure in American history. In so many ways, Dr. King holds a unique position in our national collective memory. Among all the monuments that stand on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., the only one that honors someone who wasn't a president is the King Memorial. Among all the federal holidays that we observe on our national calendar, the only one that celebrates a person is Dr. King's birthday. Martin Luther King Day almost never came to be a federal holiday. The idea was initially voted down in the House of Representatives. But popular support for establishing the holiday grew after organizers commissioned none other than Stevie Wonder to write an anthem for their campaign. His now well-known song, "Happy Birthday to Ya, Happy Birthday," was for Dr. King's birthday to become a federal holiday, which it finally did become in 1983. In our national consciousness, MLK Day carries many layers of meaning. For some, it is simply a day off when schools, banks, and government offices are closed. For others, it has become a day for community service, what some organizers have cleverly branded not as a day off, but rather a day on. And indeed, many families in our own community will use the time away from school and work to volunteer this coming Monday and help combat hunger in our area by packing boxes of non-perishable food. And of course, for others among us, Martin Luther King Day is a time for remembering Dr. King's legacy and celebrating the successes of the civil rights movement. It is often easy to forget just how much our country advanced in the 1950s and 60s. But as a student in WRT's preschool recently reminded me, when Dr. King was a child, people with different color skin had to use different water fountains, a fact that the student learned in our own early childhood center. In older segments of the American Jewish community, our remembrance of the civil rights era is more sophisticated. We remember the lunch counter sit-ins and the bus boycotts, Brown versus Board of Education and the March on Washington. And in particular, we recall the specific role that members of the American Jewish community played in advancing the cause of racial justice. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel marching with Dr. King in Selma. The young Jewish activists Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, who were tragically abducted and killed while helping to register Black Americans to vote. Or, of particular pride to Reform Jews, that part of the text of the Voting Rights Act was drafted in the conference room around our movement's own Religious Action Center in D.C. All of this we celebrate and remember on Martin Luther King's birthday. And yet, if we're being honest with ourselves, we know that our commemorations only scratch the surface of Dr. King's legacy. If we take history seriously, we know that Dr. King symbolizes something bigger than our observance of MLK Day might suggest. Social commentators Jenna Wortham and Wesley Morris help us understand why. They point out that MLK Day celebrates Dr. King's birthday. But Dr. King's birth is only part of his story. Equally historic was Dr. King's death. King was only 39 years old when he was killed. As he himself famously said on the night that he was murdered in his "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech, his work was not yet complete. Wortham and Morris ask us, how might MLK Day look different if it took place not in January as a celebration of his birth, but rather in April as a lamentation of his death? Perhaps, in addition to celebrating Dr. King's accomplishments, we might also be better attuned to all of the work that he left unfinished. A helpful comparison comes from this week's Torah portion. We find ourselves in the thick of the Exodus narrative, the story of our people's escape from slavery in Egypt. Like Martin Luther King Day, this foundational story of the Jewish people carries with it many layers of meaning. On its most basic level, it is a story of freedom. After being enslaved in Egypt for more than 400 years, Moses, Miriam, and Aaron led the Israelites out from the cruel hand of bondage. On this most basic level, the Exodus is a story of the triumph of good over evil, a story of hope, a reminder that no matter how dire our circumstances may be, change is always possible. But there are layers deeper still than this. As any careful student of the Hebrew Bible will tell you, the book of Exodus does not end after the Israelites are freed from Egypt. They journey onward from there to Mount Sinai, where they receive the Ten Commandments. They take upon themselves the responsibility to lead ethical, humane lives, to remember the pain of slavery, and use their lived experience in service of the oppressed. At this next layer, the Exodus narrative is not only about hope, but now is also about obligation. But there is still a third layer of meaning to the Exodus story, a layer that might help us to understand what is missing from our observance of Martin Luther King Day, a layer of meaning that, appropriately enough, is found in the writings of Abraham Joshua Heschel. Heschel suggests that for all its successes, the Exodus was never fully completed. Yes, the Israelites were freed from bondage, and yes, they accepted the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, but even these were only just part of the goal. In order for the Exodus to be completely fulfilled, Heschel teaches, not only the Israelites, but also their Egyptian taskmasters and even Pharaoh himself needed to go out from Egypt, that house of bondage, and stand at the foot of the mountain. In order for the Exodus to be completely fulfilled, not only the enslaved, but also the enslavers would need to be set free from their own degradation. In order for the Exodus to be completely fulfilled, Israelite and Egyptian alike must take upon themselves the obligations of Mount Sinai, the responsibility to live ethical, humane lives. Until that day, the Exodus will forever remain incomplete. So too in our country. We have made tremendous strides in the work of racial justice, even just in the 39 short years of Dr. King's life. And still, the work remains incomplete. There are countless ways in which Black and Brown Americans continue to bear a disproportionate burden in our country, from income inequality to the spread of the pandemic. Issues that members of WRT's Racial Justice Working Group are learning about and fighting against together. And if that weren't enough evidence of the work we have left to do, we need only consider the widely circulated photographs of the Confederate flag and plenty of anti-Semitic paraphernalia as well, being subversively paraded through the halls of the Capitol a week ago Wednesday. It is good to celebrate all that Dr. King achieved. We should be proud that Heschel marched alongside him. Proud, but not complacent. If they were alive today, King and Heschel, without a doubt, would be preaching and marching against inequity. We must remind ourselves that for all our contemporary adulation of Dr. King, he was, in his own time, despised and eventually murdered for being on the cutting edge of social change. His work was left unfinished. This Martin Luther King Day, let us not take a day off. Let us not only recall the successes of the civil rights movement. Let us not only celebrate the day of Dr. King's birth, but also lament the day of Dr. King's death, and remember how much unfinished work he left for us to do. Unless we carry it forward, the Exodus will remain incomplete. Shabbat Shalom.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I should say them loud, say them clear for the whole wide world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart, remove all the bars that can keep us apart. I wish you could know how it feels to be me. Then you see and agree that everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Yes, I'm way overdue. I'd be starting all anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea, and I'd sing, 'cause I know how it feels to be free.
We take a moment now to think of friends and loved ones who are in need of a prayer for healing. And I'd ask that if there's someone you're thinking of this Shabbat who's in need of a prayer for healing, that you might choose to share their name in the chat box of whichever digital platform it is you're joining us on this evening, or simply carry their name with you in your heart as we offer these names aloud. Our WRT community prays for healing for Ezra Yarden ben Harav Elkanah Leib Veharabah Eliana Leah, Anthony and Elizabeth Danker, Mordechai ben Yaakov, Deborah Kapnick, Nicole Shusi, Susan Colby, Neil Glasgow, Andrea Reiner, Chaim ben Sipora, Masha Batsora, Leah Greenspan, Aviva Tzila bat Esther Bela, Dan Sokoloff, Jeffrey Millman, Cheryl Brickman, Chava Batsara, Eliyahu Chaim ben Fradel, Sheila Freed, Tanya Romanoff, Yitzchak Yona ben May, Malka Tzipora bas Rachel, Tamar bat Malka, Heschel Meir ben David Achana, David Ze'ev ben Fruma Etzel, Mark Wolf, Shai Aviad ben Balfora, Alter Shmuel ben Chava Leah. We offer now the words of our prayer for healing, Misha Berach.
We begin our concluding prayers now with the words of Aleinu, and I would invite you to please rise. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, לתת גאולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשחווים ומודים, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
It's been said that the information we typically include on a gravestone is wildly incomplete. We often list the date on which a person was born and the date on which a person died, two factors about a life over which we have no control whatsoever. And for everything that matters, for everything in between those two randomly chosen dates, we put only a dash, only a hyphen, where instead we know there was a person, a life, wishes, dreams, hopes, and fears. And so, as we prepare now to offer the words of the mourner's Kaddish and remember people whose time on earth has come to an end, we think not just of the day on which they were born or the day on which they died, but all the days in between, the days that make up a human life. I'd ask mourners in our congregation to please feel invited to rise when they hear their loved one's name said aloud. We remember first those most recently taken from us. Sheldon Adelson, friend of Sandy and Paul Schiffman. Sid Rosenblatt, father of Mark Rosenblatt. Gladys Waller, mother of Cass Waller. Bruce Rabiner, friend of Mark Roller. Saul Silverman, father of Jody Razumna. Frances Ellman, mother of Howard Ellman. Blossom Katz, mother of Nancy Aresu. Jack Edelstein, brother of Harvey Gorin and uncle of Andrew Gorin, Lisa Purcell, and Erica Rublin. Doris Chesler, grandmother of Matthew Chesler. David Gray, husband of Laura Gray and father of Tracy Gray Kawai and Robert Gray. Dina Hubble, wife of Howard Labkin, mother of Emily and Andrew Bernstein, daughter of Barbara and Marvin Hubble, sister of Richard Hubble, and ex-wife of Jonathan Bernstein. Naomi Blumenthal, mother of Sherry Schneider. And on the anniversary, the yahrzeit of their death, we remember Pearl G. Axelrod, Helen Beck, Isidore Gorishow, Henry Becker, Isidore Nemirovsky, Lena Black, Cleo Chertoff, Arlene Davidson, Alma Feldman, Mickey Frankel, Leon Frankel, Harold Morris, Peggy Friedman, Molly Fromer, Edna Garb, Harry Garb, Ben Thomas, Paul Gardner, John Gellis, Sophie Ginsberg, Mary Goldsmith, Helene Griebel, Sylvia Green, George Greenfield, Norma Joseph, Ernest Kallman, Kate Kay, William Ellie Cohn, Leon Corin, Francis Corins, Harry Latkow, Edwin Lebo, Eleanor Leff, Ilya Lakshin, Lily Melamed, Celia Meyerson, Harry Mizrahi, Bernard Moser, Bertie Nadler, Omer Sweeney, Barbara Ostreich, Nathan Perlis, Irving Resnick, Margaret Ressler, Faye Richmond, Philip Rose, Helen Ross, Saul Rothkopf, Shirley Shear, Michael J. Seelig, Steve Starr, Vivian Stevens, Evelyn Tooby, Anna Unger Weinberg, Stefan Weinberg, Melvin Weisbart, Mona Weiss, Gerson Werner, Claire Wiener, Louis Uden, Phil Zarkin, Carol Zell, Burton Zellner, Mickey Zillow. If there are any names to add to our commemoration that have not yet been said out loud, or any that I've inadvertently mispronounced, I invite you to say them now. We join together in the words of the mourner's Kaddish, which can be found on the screens in front of us, giving thanks for the gift of life. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, B'yalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uv'yizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei almayah. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal Shemed kudsha brichu. Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Ta'amiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high cause peace to descend on us and on all who mourn, to which we say, Amen. A few brief announcements before we conclude our service. Our observance of Shabbat continues tomorrow morning, starting at 9 a.m. with our Torah study group. We'll begin by praying together and then engage together in Torah study. That's tomorrow morning at 9, of course, on a Zoom platform. There's so much going on at WRT in the coming weeks. I can only share a few highlights with you. So let me share with you that this coming Thursday evening at 7 p.m., you're invited to join Rabbi Levy and our Freebirds group for a discussion about Jews and Blacks in the civil rights era, led by our good friend Billy Planer from Etgar 36. If you've ever had the chance to travel with Billy on one of his trips to all different parts of the United States and learn a little bit more about our country's history and heritage, it's sure to be a terrific conversation. Billy's an awesome educator and actually a good friend. That's this Thursday at 7 p.m. and there is a registration required and a small fee associated with it to help support Billy's work and to support WRT's Hungry and Homeless Fund. Check our e-communications to find that link to register. The one other piece of information that I'll share on this set of announcements is that a week from now on Friday night, we'll have a special Shabbat service in which we bless new babies who were born into this community in the calendar year of 2020. So if there's a new baby in your extended family, we'd invite you to come and join us for a special celebration. And we ask that you please RSVP so we can know in advance who's going to be with us. We're hoping that the newborns, or they may not be newborns anymore, that the new babies can be shown on screen if it's not too late past their bedtime. We'll bless them at the first part of the service so that it's not too late. That's next Friday night. Please RSVP looking at our e-communications and check our e-communications for many, many other things that are going on in the coming few weeks. Last, we wish a Mazal Tov to Amanda Gorin, who tomorrow morning becomes a bat mitzvah on our bima. Mazel Tov to Amanda and to her family. Why don't we conclude our service by making Kiddush together? And I invite you, if you have, to lift up something sweet. Cantor, would you please lead us?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava u'bratzon hinchilanu. Zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, Yehu Yom Techilah Lemikra'e Kodesh, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. Yivanu Bacharta, V'yotanu Kidasha, Mikol Hamim, V'shabbat Kodshecha, V'ahava u'bratzon, Hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Chaim. And having given thanks for things in our life that is sweet, why don't we now give thanks for things in our life that help to sustain us, like this raisin challah, which was the one they had available at my bakery. Please join with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
If someone who's joining us here in our own Zoom room, we'll welcome you up. And if you wish not to have your face shown, you can simply turn off your camera. To everyone else out there on our live streaming platforms, we wish you Shabbat shalom.